The collapse of civilization is an open secret, but you wouldn't really know without reading Gail because there are so many optimists. And sure, you can be an optimist until it happens. Just like you could be an optimist on the Titanic until it actually sank after it hit the iceberg, right? So we're at a point where we have hit the iceberg, but we haven't sunk yet. So you can think that we're gonna be saved. Well, if you read Gail Tverberg, you're gonna realize otherwise, and you probably won't realize it just from reading her blog without the comments. You have to really hang out there and see how she responds to comments, right? Then it dawns on you that she's actually way more knowledgeable about this than those optimists. And those optimists are big names. I mean, we're talking about the Club of Rome. We're talking about Charles Hall and Hugo Bardi and those guys. So now I am going to read a comment by Gail Tverberg. That is what I'm talking about. The kind of comments that actually convinced me that she knows what's coming. That she knows that the system can no longer function. And that collapse is imminent. Collapse of industrial civilization. Now, here is her comment replying to one news study about renewables, saying they will have such a wonderful energy return on energy invested that they can save us. But she says that's wrong. It's just not true, and here's why. The study is basically misleading. It is written to support the renewables will save us view. It compares things that are not really comparable. It assumes that intermittent electricity that is not available when you want it is comparable to dispatchable electricity, among other things. It assumes that ratios based on future model electricity are equivalent to historical same calendar period comparisons. I have been deeply involved with this group for a long time. Charles Hall was the one who started it. David Murphy got his PhD under Hall. Hugo Bardi has been closely involved with many publications for the Club of Rome. Even Dennis Meadows has given his endorsement of this EROEI stuff. I am convinced that Donella Meadows and Jay Forrester were the real architects of the 1972 Limits to Growth study. Marco Ragwe is chief of the Renewables for Savers group. Michael Carbajalis-Dale is or was the chief editor of the supposed academic journal for the EROEI group, and I was an editor, but I am fairly certain that it stopped publication for lack of articles. I believe the confusion started because the 1972 Limits to Growth model makes a somewhat equivalent calculation. What it does is compare resources needed for investment during a particular calendar year to total resources consumed during the same calendar year. It turned out from the model calculations I saw that once the resources needed for investment exceeded 5% of total resources extracted, the system seemed to collapse. In some sense, this would be vaguely equivalent to an EROEI of 20-1. Any overall EROEI of a smaller number would collapse the system. Any required investment of over 5%, say 6 or 7%, would collapse the system. These investment ratios were for all kinds of resources combined. Thus, besides energy resources, they included extraction of minerals such as copper and lithium. It would even include the extraction of sand used for fracking and the use of stone used for building homes. Battery making would be included in this, as would building of transmission lines and putting out fires. The folks doing these EROEI calculations are convinced that all energy is equivalent and all electricity is equivalent. The concept of EROEI is somewhat helpful for teaching beginning students about the concept of diminishing returns, for example, as oil wells are built deeper. Models tend to be wrong because the problem really occurs on a calendar period basis. We cannot get prices up high enough to extract the copper and lithium and oil we need to operate the system. The system has already reached collapse mode, as far as I can see. I have been trying for years to explain to these folks how their calculations are misleading. Writing up an academic paper to say these things seemed like an exercise in frustration. Who would peer review it? Where would it be published? If they didn't understand what I explained before, why would they understand it now? The saying goes, all models are wrong, some are helpful. The EROEI model is not helpful for comparing different fuels. If I write the problem up on our finite world, I will make some enemies, but I doubt many people will understand what I am saying. So that was Gail's comments, and I am here to say that I understand. I understand at least that she understands this better than the people who say renewables will save us. I think Gail has figured it out. I think civilization is collapsing. That's just the way it is, and there is nothing we can do about it. Okay, so let me now try to sum up in my own words what Gail is saying. Because if I can't do that, then I haven't understood her, right? But I think I have. I understand that we definitely need to invest more than 5% of the energy from whatever sources we have in the future. It's totally intuitive that we would need to invest over 5% of them, which means an EROEI of 20. Okay. If they were oil, maybe that would work. Maybe these EROEI people were right about that as a viable EROEI. So far I'm following that they could even be right. The EROEI people, I mean. But when the EROEI people make these ridiculous assumptions that don't even agree with their own models, like using the calendar year that is different from the one you actually need the energy, that would violate the laws of physics. You have to use the energy that is available at any given time. You can't borrow from the future. So when they make these assumptions about the renewables, plus they consider electricity to be equivalent to other forms of energy, plus they consider intermittent electricity to be just as good as an electricity you can use reliably when you want it, then it's easy to see that Gail is right. Where I'm not intuitively following her is why you definitely would have a collapsing system if you had to invest more than 5% of your energy return in all those things she said, including putting out fires and everything. That's a cutoff point that I wouldn't have come up with myself, but I don't have a reason to assume that it could work to have it higher. So I'm just gonna take Gail's word for it that we can't get by with having to invest more than 5% of our energy in all those things. So unfortunately, this civilization is collapsing. And this word is overused, right? You don't really grasp what it means unless you read Gail's work for a while, because you don't know how horrible it is. And that's a good thing. It's best for people to be optimists as long as they can. So if you're not convinced by this video either, then good for you. Stay blissfully ignorant as long as you can. I almost wish I could do the same.